How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good friend, my co-host from the West Coast, Nick Norman. Nick, how you doing today, man?
Doing well, doing well. We're getting closer and closer to the upcoming NFL draft. So, of course, got to start breaking out the football attire, rocking a TJ Watt today. But getting very excited, of course. It feels like draft season's coming to a head with the NFL draft in Pittsburgh next Thursday. We, of course, are going to be live streaming our reaction to the first round, which I'm super excited about. Still still trying to figure out where my setup's going to be, if it's going to be same as last year or not. So figuring that out for myself. But excited to be back with you talking about the draft, just figuring out what sort of trades are going to happen, because there have been a lot of reports lately that a bunch of teams in the top 10 want to trade down, and trades make for a lot of interest, a lot of intrigue.
Mm-hmm.
Really curious, because it feels like we know what the top 10 or 12 sort of players are as far as who those top guys are. But considering there are teams that are wanting to move around, there are going to be some fits that teams or people like us haven't pondered quite yet, which is going to be fun, because a team like the Cowboys that probably wouldn't have had a shot to get a really high end blue chip player, they might trade up and then be in the range to get a really impactful defender like they want.
For
But
sure.
we'll see on draft night. How are you doing today, Jack?
Yeah, doing well. Yeah, looking forward to next week for sure. Looking forward to finishing up going through our post free agency needs for these teams. We still have the AFC East and the AFC North that we're going to talk about today, and yeah, I think it'll be a good time for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me just pull up my notes. I apparently closed them, so I'll need to pull up my notes because
Well, while
I'm
you're
silly.
pulling those up,
Mm-hmm.
let's get right into it with the AFC East, starting with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills last year they did not win the division, which is something that we have not been used to saying for quite a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
They did not win the division. Won their first round game in the wild card, but then lost to the Denver Broncos in the divisional round. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
as always, with Northeastern fans of all teams, the refs screwed them over. You know, it had nothing to do with anything else. Um, but that said, this was. I think it's safe to say that this was expected from the Buffalo Bills this year. The time was sort of coming for them that they needed to regress a little bit. And then it sort of leaves you with the question of like, okay, how far are they regressing? And is it rebuild time? Is their window closed temporarily or not? I don't think it is yet if they do the right things here this offseason. When I look at the Buffalo Bills and I think about their needs, I'm looking at the interior of the offensive line. Not only are their players not great, they also don't have many of them. So whether it's just to get depth or to just improve a little bit, I think that would be incredibly important for them. Then turning to the defense, I look at their defensive line. Their their edge room is interesting. Greg Rousseau had a great year last year. They also had rookie T.J. Sanders out of South Carolina. He didn't have a great year, but also very young. And they also have Bradley Chubb. And so I feel like what we've seen with the Bills recently is they'll have a flashy name in the edge room, but they won't have flashy play in the edge room. Um, so I would be okay with them thinking about that, but that said, where I would actually focus when I say defensive line though is on their defensive tackles. I think they have to get better there. If you get better, in the front, in the middle, then that makes it easier for your linebackers, which makes it easier for your safeties. I'll talk about safeties here in a minute. But their defensive tackles, just the ones that they had, did not play very well last year, and they need to get better. Ed Oliver, has been great for them. and is still great when healthy. He had some injury concerns last year. Hopefully they can get him healthy, but also, he's getting up there in age. This is about to be year 7, I believe, for him, if not year 8. I think 7. So you want to start thinking about how to make his life easier by not having him bear all the weight there. Yeah, and I think that could be a place to really help shore up their defense. And then lastly, looking at their defensive backs, their corners, they've got some young guys that you want to wait to give up on them yet. I really liked Maxwell Hairston coming out last year. He had an okay year last year, not great, but okay. Like to see him develop and get a little bit better. They've got a couple other corners. I wouldn't hate them taking corner just for depth, but I don't necessarily see like this is the wide glaring hole like I do see for them at safety. Um, they've got C.J. Gardner Johnson who does his thing where he hops around, doesn't play well, gets cut, gets signed to the Eagles as they or as they go to the Super Bowl. So then he looks like, man, what a good player, but in reality, he really isn't. They also have Geno Stone. Cole Bishop. Cole Bishop had a decent year last year, but you can get better at safety. And one thing that I felt was different about Buffalo last year was that teams could run on them really easily. And so if you sort of clean up working your way back in the middle, that'll significantly help. So I'd say interior offensive line, safety, and defensive tackle.
Mm-hmm. I think those are all good shouts, Jack, for sure. When I look at this team, I look at a lot of the same weaknesses as you do. When I look at this team, first off, I look at left guard. They, of course, had the loss of David Edwards in free agency. He's been a good, steady player for them, and with him gone, that spot's opened. Then I look at defense, of course, because this defense was not good last year. Their run defense, of course, was dreadful. Very memorable the last 2 years with the team like the Ravens just tearing them apart. Derrick Henry just shredding them. And this defense just, I also look at it that the defensive personnel aren't good, but also the scheme helped them a lot in the regular season. And Sean McDermott's gone now. And Sean McDermott's the type of coach that was able to raise the floor for this team's defense for years and years and years. And so I think that this defense could pretty feasibly be a bottom 10, bottom 5, maybe even defense this next year. That will make me think that I need to invest in it more. I look at some of the same spots you were looking at. Safety, Cole Bishop, I think he can be solid. But C.J. Gardner-Johnson, not going to be there long. Geno Stone, older, not a very impactful player. I think that having good safety play to be able to help limit the big plays so that you can commit more players to the run will be helpful for this team. Because I think that this is the type of team right now that they've invested a lot of draft capital as far as just picks into the defensive tackle room, where Deion Walker drafted recently, TJ Sanders drafted recently, Ed Oliver, of course, top 10 pick, Landon Jackson drafted recently, Phil Mathis, Dwayne Carter. That's 4 or 5 dudes who have all been drafted or invested significantly in the defensive tackle room, where I don't think necessarily it will make the most sense to go defensive tackle just because of the number of spots. But the run defense is, of course, not very good. But that makes me think that the strategy that I'd go about it more with is get better players for the pass game. So then you don't need to worry about investing as many bodies in passing downs. So you can commit more against the run game, where you can say, oh, our corners and safeties are good, so let's just slide another linebacker closer to the line of scrimmage. Let's bring a safety down into the box because we feel good about our DBs. And so that will be my strategy if I'm the Bills, where I think safety and I think edge to be able to generate a little bit more pressure. Ed Oliver, of course, he's been able to generate pressure. Greg Russo. But Bradley Chubb's just one of the many dudes who's walked into that door as a question mark, as a guy who you're expecting a lot from, where previously you had dudes like Joey Bosa or like Von Miller that have held down that exact same spot. And I think you're going to need a lot more production out of that sort of edge rusher, or at least add another dude to the rotation. That will be my strategy, going edge rusher, safety, and then interior offensive line, as you said. those are my picks for the Bills.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, I hadn't thought about retooling the defense in that way. That's interesting. Definitely makes you think. Moving on to Miami. So when I look at the Dolphins, here's the thing. There have been enough of these Cinderella stories of reclamation project quarterbacks in the NFL that I think we're now the pendulum is swinging too far to the point that everyone thinks they can do it. I don't think it will happen with Malik Willis here in Miami. I don't. I for his sake and for Miami's sake, I hope I'm wrong. But I think if you're Miami, you can't be working with the long-term foresight of Malik Willis as our QB of the future. We have him for now, and we have him if it pans out, great. But in all likelihood, he's probably a bridge until we draft the next guy, with a high value pick next year or the year after. So that said, what Miami should be doing to draft right now is to draft to have a young but experienced, cheap but good team when they draft that quarterback. So if you look at this roster, there's nothing that you look at this roster that says any of what I just said. But the big place that of course you need to think with that is on the offense. So first we gotta have to address the offensive line. Oh my goodness. Aaron Brewer was great last year as their center, and he's fine. He's great. Good. We'll keep him. Other than that, though, I don't see a single name here that I feel comfortable or that I don't feel comfortable axing. Jonas Savaiinaea, again, he's young, but he was literally graded as the worst guard in the National Football League last year. Yikes, so get some offensive linemen. Because I know that there are other needs. A lot of people are mocking the Dolphins at 11 to take one of the corners that's available. But, I don't know. If Monroe Freeling is there, I'd I'd consider it if I'm Miami. Because yes, your DBs, and I'll talk about the defensive backs here in a sec, especially the corners. That is a massive hole for you. However, I would rather have an experienced and good offensive line when I bring in the rookie quarterback than an experienced defensive backfield. But I'm also bringing in rookies that haven't played with one another and haven't played in the NFL when I bring in that rookie quarterback. So that's where sort of I'm feeling about the offensive line in terms of priorities for this team. The next thing would be wide receiver. Let's look at this wide receiver room. Jalen Tolbert, Tutu Atwell, Terrace Marshall Jr., Theo Weiss, AJ Henning, Malik Washington, Taj Washington. A lot of guys that have experience playing in the NFL, not a lot of guys that you go, oh, good heavens, they're going to destroy me. Jalen Tolbert maybe is the best receiver they've got on the roster, maybe Tutu Atwell. But that doesn't scare you if you're a defense.
No.
And also those aren't game-changing wide receivers. When we talked about some other teams we talked about, they have a lot of wide receiver 2s. They don't have a wide receiver 1. Miami has a lot of wide receiver 3s. So
agreed. Couldn't agree more.
So and we've said it every episode multiple times, wide receiver is such a deep position in this draft. You could in round 2 you could get a wide receiver 1 in this draft just because that's how many highly touted wide receivers there are. So you need to because though I don't think Malik Willis is going to be their quarterback of the future, you can't know if you don't give him an opportunity by getting receivers for him to throw to. And if he isn't, you then at least have young, cheap, but experienced, NFL experienced wide receivers on the roster when you 1 or 2 years from now when you decide, okay, let's use a first round pick on a quarterback. Last thing, the defensive backfield. Oh my goodness. Let me read you these corners. Daryl Baker Jr., Marco Wilson, Alex Austin, Miles Battle, Juju Brents, AJ Green III, Ethan Robinson, Storm Duck, Ethan Bonner, Jason Marshall Jr., Isaiah Johnson, Jason Maitre. A lot of those guys are what we call nobodies, or you've never like you've never even heard of them before. Because there's a difference between a nobody and you've never heard of them before. Nobody, it's like they've played and they're nobody. Like, don't worry about it. Never heard of them before. You're like, who? I didn't know who Juju Brents was before. Like, I looked at this roster. That's not entirely true. I do remember when he got drafted out of K State a couple of years ago. But NFL wise, I didn't know who Juju Brents was. Right? Like, you got to get better. And so like I said everything I said about the offensive line, but then I then go and look at the corners and I'm like, okay, but holy crap. Like it's tough. I do still again thinking about the future when you bring in a new, rookie quarterback to potentially be your quarterback of the future the next couple of years. I do still lean on the offensive line, but you can't fault them for taking a corner at pick number 11 if it's there. So that's where I'm at with the Miami Dolphins.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree with you more, Jack. Basically, every note you hit on, 100% true. Another team we're going to talk about later today, I think, has one of the worst receiving cores in the league, if not the worst. If they didn't have the worst receiving core in the league, it's the Miami Dolphins. And I think the Miami Dolphins are worse. This receiving core, like you said, it's pretty friendly to say they have a lot of wide receiver threes. Like Tutu Atwell, Jalen Tolbert, Malik Washington, like those are all maybe wide receiver threes, but they're probably wide receiver threes you want to upgrade away from. The Rams had Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, and they're like, Tutu Atwell, I think we want to upgrade from you. Like these are the kind of dudes, Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver 3 for the Cowboys, but they're like, we want to get somebody else in there who can do a little more than Tolbert. They're guys that are meant to be rostered in the NFL, but by no means are meant to be starters in the NFL. If they drafted multiple wide receivers in the top 2, if not 3 rounds, I wouldn't be shocked. I'd be elated for them if they did that. I think they need to draft multiple wide receivers and highly if they want to field a competitive offense. And I don't know that they do. With this team, we don't know that they want to be competitive, to be honest. Moving to the offensive line, I didn't put it as a big need for them, even though the offensive line isn't particularly good. Patrick Paul, they drafted highly. Jonas Savania, they drafted highly. Aaron Brewer was good. Jamari Sellier is a stopgap. And Austin Jackson, they drafted highly. I think this team is okay with guys who are bad, who have the potential to be good long-term because they're not trying to win now. They probably aren't going to be trying to win the year after that as well because they're just that far away. But for a dude like Jonas Savania or a Patrick Paul, like those are both dudes where it's like, well, why don't we just give them playing time? Either they're going to be bad or they're going to develop, but like we don't need to be good. And we don't need guys who are good now. We need guys who are going to be good in 2 or 3 years from now. And so I don't really feel a need this moment to be drafting to replace either of those dudes, even though I don't like either of them particularly. But the Dolphins, I think, aren't on that timetable to try and be good right now. Moving, though, to the secondary, that's the other big need. I 100% agree with you. Their corners almost as bad as their receivers. I think their corners are probably a little better than their receivers, but their most proven dudes walked out of the room completely this offseason, and they just didn't add anybody at corner that moves me whatsoever. Safety, I think, is almost as bad. Lonnie Johnson's been around the league, but you don't really want to have him playing meaningful snaps. Dante Trader played okay last year. Zane Anderson, I think, is sneaky underrated. They got him from Green Bay. He's actually a safety who I think can give you good snaps, but I still think you can majorly upgrade around him in that safety room. So I just throw every sort of DB slot in that bucket, where if you could get a good DB round 1 or 2 or 3. Like, I think you just draft a good DB no matter what position they play, and you just move dudes around. So I definitely agree with you. DB, wide receiver, offensive line, with offensive line being the one that I would prioritize least at this point.
Okay. Sounds good. Nick, tell me what you think about New England's roster right now.
New England, they were just so ahead of schedule last year. That's what I look at when I look at this New England roster, where they made the Super Bowl, and they made the Super Bowl where I didn't feel great about any particular spot on their roster. Their defense outperformed the talent level, I would say. Their offense outperformed the talent level as well, because I think their offense outside of Drake May was pretty wholly untalented. And their defense had some dudes who played well, but their defense I would consider to be better than their offense. When I look at this team, though, I look at offensive tackle being a big need, even though if you look at it, it's like, okay, Morgan Moses, he can play well. Why am I blinking on his name? Will Campbell, he can maybe play well. But Will Campbell, I think, especially post Super Bowl, everybody was looking at him like, wow, your arms are short. Wow, you got abused in the Super Bowl. Wow, you should play guard. And I think that's where his future is at. And Morgan Moses is old. He's in his mid 30s. I think that if you drafted an offensive tackle, you could slot him in at either spot and feel good about it. You could move around dudes on your offensive line and feel much better about that as well. I think offensive tackle, though, among all the positions on the offensive line, because I think you have more dudes on the outside who can move in than inside dudes who can move out. So I'd prioritize offensive tackle there. And then after that, I would look at I described it as true wide receiver one, where for the last number of years we described the Packers as they have a lot of good wide receiver twos, but they need that alpha, that wide receiver one. And some folks still believe that still now. The Patriots, they have a lot of bodies, but they have a lot of bodies that I think are good complementary wide receivers. But I think for the sake of this offense, you need a game breaker type of receiver, whether that's a wide receiver or a tight end. I think that they were able to compete this year and make the Super Bowl because their scheme was good, because they had players who could be in the right spot, where they had players who could be solid and make the necessary catches. But they didn't really have any game changers, in my opinion, that it's like, man, we got to double cover that receiver. Wow, that dude might get 10 catches this game. Outside of maybe Stephon Diggs, who obviously wasn't what he once was and isn't on the team anymore. So I think a true wide receiver one is a massive need for this team. And then I would put edge. I just think that you can never have enough edge rushers, and for a team where they were able to generate pressure, but it was primarily through blitzes last year. Draymond Jones is a dude who can be a contributor, can be a rotational type player. Harold Landry played well last year, but he's had injury issues. He's getting up there in age. I think that having more contributors in the edge room so that you're able to devote fewer bodies from the inside linebacker position to having to generate pressure in that way will be beneficial. So I just put a contributor from the edge rusher position to kind of round out that edge rush room.
Yeah, I agree with you. Wide receiver is really important. Like we saw how successful Drake May was last year without having that alpha like you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine if then he gets it, like
Mm-hmm.
and I really feel like with this New England Patriots team, if you get that guy, everyone else will actually be really good. But the problem is
Yes.
these guys like Mac Hollins, Kayshawn Boutte, Demario Douglas, like they're not built to be the I'm gonna take on the best corner on the other team
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna win that battle. But and I know a lot of people are basically just calling it an inevitability that the Patriots get AJ Brown. Until
Mm-hmm.
it happens, it's not, like that's
Mm-hmm.
just how that is. And if Howie Roseman hasn't done it yet, there's clearly a reason that he's cooking. Um, so, but that said, if you do get that guy that, the opposing defenses can be like, oh crap, we really need to take care of this. We need to get our top DB. We need to be giving safety help, that sort of thing. Then, yeah, a guy like a Kayshawn Boutte can have, like a near 1,000-yard season next year, right? Like that can very easily happen. But you need to make it easier for him and for your other receivers. I also look at this offensive line and echo a lot of the things that you said. The tough thing with the Will Campbell to guard thing, it obviously won't happen yet because he's still so young and you just used a fourth overall pick on him. The other part is, they're going to move Jared Wilson to center. You have Mike Onwenu, who had a good year last year at guard, and you also brought in Elijah Vera Tucker this offseason, who is a guard. So I I think we just kind of need to like, okay, how does that go with the interior? That said, they don't have much depth at tackle anyway. So it might be good to, certainly would be good to think about investing there. And then on the defense, I agree with you with edge. They have some edges that can give some production, but not the type of edge that will give the production. Is sort of how I feel about that. So yeah, totally echo what you were saying about them.
Mhm. Sweet. Moving on to the Jets, I have just a couple of, I would say, even though the roster overall is not great, I have one specific need and then a couple where it's like, okay, I think they could upgrade, but they're not bleeding, which is surprising because this Jets team's not good. But I would say specifically as far as the wide receivers go, I would say a slot wide receiver because I think Garrett Wilson, of course, is a really good player. And I think AD Mitchell can be a really good outside player potentially if he gets his head straight. I think he has a very high ceiling, but his consistency is obviously an issue. I think a slot wide receiver to complement those two wide receivers, like if they could get Mekhi Lemon at 16, I think they'd be elated by that. I think Jordan Tyson at 16, another great player that if you could get him in that spot would be awesome. But I think a slot or an inside outside type of receiver who you can move around will be awesome for them. So I'd put that as a need as far as the offense goes. Outside of that on the offense, I feel pretty okay about the offense though. Moving to the defense is where it gets a little hairier, though, where I think linebacker is a really big need for the long term. Demario Davis is a million years old. Like that dude is 38 for a linebacker, which is ancient. Jamie Sherwood did not play well last year. You need a linebacker for this year to be part of that linebacker core, and you need a linebacker long term because neither of these dudes, or it's possible neither are on the roster next year, and you just need bodies there. Corner, I think, is also a massive need. Sauce Gardner's gone. They signed Nahshon Wright to a 1-year deal, but I don't think you have a cornerback one, and I think it's on the table. You don't have a cornerback two either. You need corner play. You need a corner in this draft in the top 4 rounds for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of people are talking about the Jets and wide receiver, and I I understand it. They probably will take a wide receiver. I think they'll get, uh, you know, a great wide receiver when they do it. Um, for me, I want them to use that early second round pick on it because if you sort of look at the wide receivers, like there's going to be someone available for them early in the second round that
Casey Concepcion will be a great pick.
yeah, he
At
might
that
be
one for
there.
sure.
Denzel Boston might be there. Omar Cooper Jr. might be there. Like they're going to be wide receivers that might be there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of teams have a lot of wide receivers graded highly, and because of that, I think there are going to be a lot of teams that feel like, hey, we want to get a wide receiver, and we're going to get a really good one on day 2. And I think because of that, we're going to surprisingly see less wide receivers taken in the first round than we would expect, or then have the draftable grade to because you might have a team that's looking at wide receiver and running back, and they decide to take Jadarian Price in the first round, and we're like, what? And it's like, well, yeah, they needed a running back and a receiver, and who's the next running back that you're going to take? So like I think there's going to be some of that, and so we'll see, yeah, a Casey Concepcion, some one of those guys then, early in the second round, which I think would be a great spot for the Jets to address that position. Looking at the defense, though, I look at edge. Uh, yeah, they've got guys that were, you know, taken highly, but haven't really panned out. Um, They've got guys that just aren't quite doing it. Um, they don't have a game wrecker, right? They don't, and I think that's a strong reason why a lot of people are mocking David Bailey to them. That said, I totally agree with you with linebacker, and I would really like to see them take Sonny Styles number 2 overall. I think one that would drastically improve their linebacker core, but also I think that he could get frisky rushing the passer as well. And you could use him a little bit in that. Again, he's a linebacker, he's an off-ball linebacker, but like move him around a little bit. Um, and I just think he's just oozing with potential, and so that could work. And then yeah, I don't trust these corners, um, frankly. And Sauce Gardner, with all teams when they trade or lose in free agency, their top, their number one corner, a lot of people like to think, oh, well, our number 2 corner is really good. He can slide in there. And it's like, he can't, though. The reason that he's good is because he's not having to go up against Mike Evans. He's not having to go up against DK Metcalf. He's not having to go up against Jameson Williams. He's not having to go up against, whoever the wide receiver one or whoever the X is, right? On the opposite side. But they are good at covering the wide receiver too. They are good at covering the wide receiver 3, right? So I think that would be good. That said, like um Aaron Glenn, in his last couple seasons with the Lions, when a lot of guys were getting hurt, did an incredible job getting corners to play up to a potential that no one else has been able to. I think I think of well, I just saw his name, Kindle Vildor. I think he's rostered to Miami right now. Hasn't been the same, right? Because Aaron Glenn's able to make it work. So, but that said, I know that he wants that guy also. He wants to have that lockdown guy. So I would say that those are the 3 spots for me. Um, yeah, you could also argue. I wouldn't fight with you if you wanted to see them take a defensive lineman. Um, because of trading Quinnen Williams. That said, Tavondre Sweat and David Onyemata had great years last year, so that would that would kind of be like spot 4. It's not going to make the podium,
Right.
but yeah. So I agree with you with the Jets.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Moving on to the AFC North, we can lead off with the Browns. I'm just going to jump right into it with left tackle. I think on the offensive line, they retooled the entire thing. But right now, DeJuan Jones is slotted in to be their left tackle. And he has a very high floor, but he is very injured and very inconsistent because of the physical shape he's in, because of how large he is. He has just not been able to stay on the field at all. And so I think you can bank on him getting hurt at some point in the year. And they have nobody behind him. They got him. They have Titus Howard for right tackle. But their tackle situation could just be a mess because they traded for Titus Howard and traded basically nothing for him. And DeJuan Jones is a big question mark. So, man, I'd be really worried if I was the Browns as far as getting any sort of tackle. And their tackle, I think, is a huge need. This is the team I'm referring to. Miami, I think, worst wide receiving core in the league. This wide receiver core, I think, second. This wide receiving core, Jerry Jeudy, of course, has been on this team for a couple of years, and he had a good season and then a terrible season. Cedric Tillman injured off the field a lot. But they added nobody. They added nobody via free agency to the worst wide receiving core in the league previous to the Dolphins trading Waddle. I don't understand how you can do that. I think you got to draft 1, if not 2 wide receivers to this team, and then you can feel better about it. But, man, wide receiver is a massive need for this team in the Cleveland Browns. Moving on, I think safety is definitely a position they should add another player into. Delpit can be good. Ronnie Hickman being your other safety and being on a 1-year deal is concerning to me. I think that he can play serviceably, but considering he's on a 1-year deal too, you need another body in that safety room outside of Delpit. So I definitely throw safety in there. So left tackle, wide receiver, safety for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah. I think everyone would be surprised if they don't draft a wide receiver and an offensive tackle with their 2 first-round picks. The
That's
question
right.
is just which order do they do it? If
Mm-hmm.
I was them, I'd take the offensive tackle at 6 and take the wide receiver at 20 because there's going to be great wide receivers available to them at 20. Maybe those top three, Tate, Lemon, and Tyson. There's a chance that one of those three is there, but maybe not. Um, but still, you're gonna have wide receivers to take. Um, Everyone is talking about how quarterback is such a strong need for this team, and it is. But who are you taking in this? Who are you taking this year?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think they made the right call using a 3rd-round pick on Dylan Gabriel and a 5th-round pick on Shador Sanders in terms of, you
Mm-hmm.
know, hey, let's not spend a lot of high draft capital to take a quarterback. I think that was the right call, especially when people were talking about Shador Sanders at pick number 2, right behind Cam Ward, right? So I think that was the right decision there, um, and like I say, screw it. Let Deshaun Watson, Dylan Gabriel, and Shador Sanders each play some snaps this year. Like,
Oh.
you're not gonna you're not gonna be competitive this year. Let's work on
Mm-hmm.
getting everything else better. It's sort of similar to the Dolphins, so that when you bring in the rookie, they have something to play with. Um, and yeah, who knows? Maybe Shador Sanders blossoms this year into something that is worth kicking
Mm-hmm.
the quarterback can down the road one more year. But
Mm-hmm.
don't draft a quarterback. Uh, don't draft a quarterback this year, this go around. Um, I also look at guard. Like I don't like any of this offensive line. So
Mm-hmm.
tackle is bad. I think guard is bad. I think this could be if they could get maybe like a Spencer Fano, um,
Mm-hmm.
who, hey, we'll start you at tackle, but if we move you to guard, that'll be okay too. I'm pretty sure
Mm-hmm.
that all of the teams at the combine had Fano also snap a little bit during his workouts. So, you sort of get hey, you know what? We get a really good NFL caliber offensive lineman and we just put him where he's best and where we need him the most. I don't hate that. Um, Looking at the defense, yeah, I don't trust safety. Uh, the corners are okay. Denzel Ward is great, but also he's getting up there in age,
Mm-hmm.
and had a not his best year last year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the defensive line is really really solid. Like edge and defensive lineman is really solid. Uh, Linebackers, I would consider taking a linebacker just because of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. It seeming like this really is it for him. Unfortunately, Carson Schlesinger was great last year, but
Mm-hmm.
um, as of right now, he and Quincy Williams are the only guys on the roster that have like
Mm-hmm.
serious playing experience at linebacker um, in the NFL. So I wouldn't hate, if there's a linebacker you like better than some of these other names on here, taking that as well. But I agree with you that when it comes to the defense, safety is my biggest point of concern.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals, they of course have some particular weaknesses that are very often talked about, that being their entire defense. Their defense, of course, the last 2, 3 years has been awful. And I think when I look at this team, I just described it as defensive best player available because even though they've invested highly in a position like edge rusher, where they drafted edge in the first round last year, and I think 2 years before that drafted edge rusher in the first round as well there. I think they could still add another body into that edge rush room. So maybe not in the first, but they could add another edge there easily in the second or third for sure. Losing Trey Hendrickson, of course, was a massive loss because he's been their best defensive player for the last half decade. But defensive best player available, I think generally would be a massive need for them. After that, on the offense, interior offensive line, I think, is a big need for them because protecting Joe Burrow is obviously a massive priority. He's gotten injured in a majority of the seasons he's played in. He's obviously had a couple of major injuries with the wrist injury and the ACL his rookie year. Also, Ted Karras, Dalton Reisner, those are just dudes who are both older and not very good. And if you're not very young and not very good, you can get upgraded from. And so I
Mm-hmm.
would definitely look at that interior offensive line. And then even though it's not a massive need as far as like being terrible, I think that tight end will be a really cool position for the Bengals to target because they obviously have a great downfield passing attack because Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow can generate tons of big plays downfield. But because of that, the spacing of this offense is crazy. That's why a player like Chase Brown, who's a solid to good running back, can have really efficient, really great production as far as the yards per carry because the spacing's incredible and you have so much room. I think it's the same sort of thing why I think tight end will be an awesome position to go towards because if you have that much space in the middle of the field, you could throw the ball to the tight end and he could get 15 yards just because nobody's near him. You have a dude who, if he can win one-on-ones, can get massive chunk plays at the tight end position if you draft that spot. And the Bengals haven't drafted a good tight end in years and years and years, where Gesicki's obviously been solid to good depending on the year, but he's obviously had injury and inconsistency issues too. I just think tight end's a position where you could see a dude get massive production by just being a good player like a Gesicki, but better. And so I'd add a tight end in there for sure.
Interesting. I hadn't thought tight end because they do have Gesicki and because
Mm-hmm.
like there's I think everywhere on this defense outside of Brian Cook as safety, they could get better.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
um, so and also because there aren't great tight ends this year outside of Sadiq and then maybe the kid out of Vanderbilt. Um, but that said, I agree with you with the defense. You all can go back to our posted live stream from the draft last year. And when we talked about this team before the draft during this same exercise, we said they can use one pick on an offensive lineman. Every other pick needs to be on defense. And then their first round pick, they use it on defense and they use it on the guy that I was so low on all throughout the entire process last year. And Shamar Stewart, he can still turn it around, but this last year he graded 119th out of 119 at the edge position according to Pro Football Focus. Cincinnati, you have to do better. Like don't try to swing for the fences this year, please. Please take the bloop single. Like bloop singles are production guys that know aren't going to be Pro Bowlers, but are going to make your team better. But we don't need to get crazy. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, no, edge could be better. Defensive line, just in general, could be better. Their linebacker play was not good. Their
Mhm.
three linebackers. There were 88 linebackers last year that played enough snaps to get a Pro Football Focus grade, and they had three of them. They have three of them on their roster. They ranked 83rd, 85th, and 88th out of 88. Like that
Ah.
is so bad. That is so
Mhm.
bad.
Mhm.
Please improve there. Yeah. Again, I mentioned Brian Cook. He had a really, really solid year last year. Outside of him, though, Kyle Duggar did not play well. Jordan Battle, not great. And those are your safeties. DJ Turner, like, and Dax Hill, like, okay at corner, but you can really be better than that. So yeah, like this whole defense is
Mhm.
bad.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it'll be interesting, like, to see what they do with the offensive line because
Mhm.
Joe Burrow likes having five receivers to throw to, and it's the
Mhm.
reason that they don't tend to bring in an extra lineman or leave the tight end in blocking for the most part. When he's throwing the ball, they do it sometimes, but not as much as a lot of other teams. I think about like compared to Detroit, who is always bringing in an extra lineman or having two tight ends on the field to leave one to block while Laporta goes out for a pass. That's just diametrically opposed for Cincinnati. So if you're going to do that, then you need to have studs on your offensive line, and I don't see a single stud
Mhm.
on this offensive line.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, but the number of times that Joe Burrow, despite not having a good offensive line, despite being on his butt more than he's standing in regular season games, is able to put up 35 plus points and lose. I mean, yeah, it has to be the defense. I'm not giving them, no. I'll give them the one offensive lineman allowance like I did last year. Um, let's just yeah, and when we look at defense and it's like, yeah, let's go get an edge. Don't draft Ruben Bain. Even if he's available, don't draft Ruben Bain. Like let's not go with outliers. Let's go with proven production that fits the mold. Let's not go, we have two ends of the spectrum. We have Ruben Bain and we have Shamar Stewart. Let's meet in the middle.
Just get a proven thing. Just get Caleb Downs. Just
Yeah.
just get somebody
Yes.
who you know is going to be good. High floor,
Yes.
because you know that when you go high ceiling, low floor, you tend to get the floor. You're Cincinnati. It's how it goes.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to Baltimore. The Baltimore Ravens, this last year, it was certainly a down year for them. New head coach coming in. A lot of things that are going to be different moving forward. When I look at this team after what they, have done in free agency, when I look at the offense, I think about wide receiver. Um, Zay Flowers has been good for them, but I think he's best suited as a wide receiver too. I think that would give him the best chance to produce and produce really well. Um, I feel like as long as Lamar Jackson has been there, they haven't had the the wide receiver of an archetype like an AJ Brown, a big body down the field, threat that's just like I'm just gonna beat my guy, not let's scheme something up. So I'm running like a deep crossing route type thing, which they've been very successful with that. But I think if they could get a wide receiver like that, I think that would wide receiver like that, not meaning ability, because you're not going to draft an AJ Brown. Uh, Coming out of college, right now. Jeremiah Smith next year, maybe, but not right now. But a guy that fits the mold, that can be, can produce and can grow into that level of talent, but is that style, that mold of wide receiver, excuse me. Their interior offensive line, they lost Tyler Linderbaum. So definitely want to think about center. Uh, their guards aren't great either. Their tackles with Roger Rosengarten, Ronnie Stanley, Carson Vincent, Joe Noteboom, Corey Bullock, and Jared Lichtenhahn. Like, I like the depth there, and I like how I like Stanley and Rosengarten enough, but the interior of that offensive line has to be better, has to be improved. Um, and has to get experience in it as well. So I'd like to see them address that. Looking at the defense for Baltimore, um, I'm kind of looking at linebacker. They addressed edge with Trey Hendrickson. Uh, we'll see what the future for Mike Green holds, but if he's playing, he's young, so he's still got some time there. Um, on the defensive line, they've got Matabike, Broderick Washington, Travis Jones had a great year last year. Um, Aeneas Peebles, John Jenkins, David Olajiga, and Basil Okoye. So like they've got depth there as well. Roquan Smith is good. He had a solid year last year, but they only have 4 rostered linebackers right now. So you definitely want to get some depth there. And also, like, when I look at their secondary, Kyle Hamilton is great. Malachi Starks was a rookie last year. I think he'll get better. They also have Jalen Hawkins, who had a great year last year. At corner, Marlon Humphrey has certainly sort of fallen off, but he is experienced. Chidobe Awuzie was really, really good last year, and they've got a slew of corners. So based on the production level kind of going down and how few bodies you have in the linebacker room right now, I think that linebacker needs to be the biggest point of concern on the defense.
For sure, for sure. I get you. I would 100% agree with interior offensive line. Linderbaum left, and he became one of the highest paid dudes ever out of the state of Iowa, I would guess, because that dude just got a massive contract. But outside of him, Simpson's older, and Voorhees isn't particularly good. So I don't feel great outside of like 1 or 2 years for Simpson for anyone on the interior offensive line there. Like I think you could draft two of them easily and feel much better. That's why I think somebody like Vega Ioane is somebody who everybody thinks they're going to target. Because I think you plug him in there and then you get rid of Voorhees or throw him to the backup spot. But you still need a center. So I think they could easily go with two of them. I put in pass catcher. Right now, their top two pass catchers are Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. They've obviously been productive players for their career right now in Baltimore. But Flowers, like you said, I think is best suited as a wide receiver too. And Mark Andrews is getting down the stretch here. But Andrews just lost his two running mates at the tight end position with Likely going to the Giants, and then with I'm blanking on his name, who went to the Chargers, the big dude out of Iowa State. But Charlie Kohler, both of those dudes I really liked at tight end. And both of them I thought had good receiving skills. And Kohler is a blocking body. I think having a movement blocking dude, as well as losing your fullback, like this is a team that I think those movable sort of bodies were really valuable, and they don't have them. But combine that with the need at wide receiver. Right now, outside of Flowers, your other wide receivers are Rashad Bateman, Tez Walker, and then just like nobodies. I just think that if you have if this team could trade for AJ Brown, you have AJ Brown, Flowers as the 2, Rashad Bateman as the 3, Tez Walker as the 4. You feel so much better. You still need tight end, but you feel so much better. Like you think you have a really good wide receiving core at that point, but they don't have the wide receiver one. They need that. They need another tight end. I put DB because, of course, they have players who I think can play, but Chidobe Awuzie is moving around to many teams the last couple of years of his career because he's getting down the stretch in some ways. He played well last year, but that was under a different head coach. That was under a system that is the same system, but under a different coordinator now. And he's getting older. Marlon Humphreys has fallen off. I just think that this particular scheme that's more or less the same scheme Mike McDonald runs in Seattle, you need a lot of DBs who can play really well. And right now you have Kyle Hamilton. Wiggins had a down year after a really good rookie year. I just think that you need bodies at that DB position, and I think I'd invest a year early rather than a year late for a DB. So I'd go interior offensive line, pass catcher, and DB for the Baltimore Ravens.
Sounds good. Let me go first here at the Steelers, so then we can open it up for you.
Sure.
When I look at Pittsburgh, there are a few things that I see. One, I see wide receiver. So I know that they addressed that with Michael Pittman Jr. and DK Metcalf, but last year we saw a lot of we're putting guys on the field, but how much can they really contribute? We saw a lot of those guys leave. Like Calvin Austin, is the prime example of that. Not all of them, but if you could get a solid wide receiver so that you've got DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman Jr., and Jeremy Bernard, for example, as like your 3 wide receivers, I think that would be really, really good, and really, really solid. You just brought in Rico Dowdle this last year, who had a few flashy games with Carolina, but overall he's not that great of a running back. Jaylen Warren is sort of reaching, this will be year 4 for him, which means that it's going to be that last year, and then you sort of sign him to 1 year that's worth not much, or you sort of dump him so someone else can do the same thing. So running back maybe. I'm kind of torn between that and another position. And then I think I'm going to say tackle. And I'm going to say tackle not because I think that
Mm.
their tackle position is really bad, but because they have so few bodies. Like how many teams legitimately get their two starting tackles to play an entire season without going out for at least a couple games because you get rolled up on and you've got a bad ankle for a couple weeks, something
Mhm.
like that. Um, I also think that maybe their tackle play could improve a little bit. Um, is that the biggest need? No, of course not. But I do think that it's something worth addressing when you're looking at the offense. Looking at the defense, I'm going to suggest something that I'm going to suggest something that Steelers fans are not going to like. I think at the trade deadline this next year, you move on from T.J.
Yeah,
Watt.
yeah.
If you get the offer on draft night, that you like, you do it. But likely we're looking at a trade deadline next year. So that said, Alex Highsmith has been great. He had a great year last year. Nick Herbig, phenomenal year last year. You like Jack Sawyer also when you drafted him out of Ohio State. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to address the edge position. But I think because of that, if you have that as sort of the plan, then it's like, okay, who's going to be then the next guy on the defense, right? It was Minka, it was Cam Hayward, it was TJ Watt. Okay, who's going to be the next one that then like steps into that? This is the guy, this is the leader, this is the guy that everyone has a circle on every time he's on the field on Pittsburgh's defense. When I look at their defense right now, I don't know that I see that guy necessarily. So,
Mhm.
that means to me a defensive player that you think has the highest potential to be
Ooh.
the best, most dominant player
Mm.
when the time comes, right? So if that's an edge, it's an edge. If that's a defensive tackle, it's a defensive tackle. If that's a safety or a corner, it's a safety or a corner. But I think if you're Pittsburgh, one of the things that, and again, I grew up in Pennsylvania, I've been around the Steelers and Pittsburgh fans my whole life. One of the things that you can
Mhm.
always remember about the Steelers defense is they always had, no matter how bad the whole 11 guys on the field seemed like they would be, they had the one that everyone was so terrified of that it made the whole defense look that much better.
Mhm.
And if you're about to move from TJ Watt, which I do think it's time, you need to figure out who's going to be that next guy. And there are some really, really strong defenders in this year's draft. That you might see a guy that yeah, he's the one to do it. So,
Mhm.
but that said, wide receiver, tackle because of depth, and then
Mhm.
whoever that guy in waiting is going to be the next,
Mhm.
you know, big bad boy on Steelers defense.
I get you. I get you. I've obviously dug into this a lot. I'm a Steelers fan. It's the off season. Fans of their teams are obviously going to dig into it. You dug into the Lions and went deep on many of their picks. And I'm sure you've done tons of mock drafts saying, oh man, would it be better if we got a tackle first and then a corner? Or should we go edge rusher first and then corner, then tackle? And figuring out what combination will be best. I'm
Yep.
messing with it because everybody does that. I do that with my Steelers, of course, too. This Steelers roster, I think, even though it's going downhill in terms of the game changers, TJ Watt's not the walk on water defensive player of the year he once was. Cam Hayward's obviously old, but still good. Minka's not on this team anymore. Joey Porter's come into his own, but he doesn't flash as like the superstar corner as far as like splash plays, but he's played very well. I've looked a lot at this team and I feel really good about the roster in a lot of ways where for many years the Steelers old general manager during when he ended his time his last first round draft pick was Kenny Pickett. He reached on a lot of players did Kevin Colbert back in the day during 2018-ish to 2022 his last 5 years of his career. He reached a lot. And we've been resetting this roster since 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. And now this year is going to be the fourth draft for Omar Khan, who's been a really good general manager. This roster, I think, is on the upswing and has a lot of players who I think are young and moving in the right direction. Broderick Jones, of course, at left tackle is a player who you brought up the position. He got injured last year with a major neck injury that looked like it could end his career. The play that it happened on was a freak play where the defensive player did something insane where he jumped up in the air and jumped onto Broderick's head and messed up his neck really badly. But the reports are now that he's potentially going to be ready for training camp, that Broderick Jones isn't going to be out this season, which is really good for the Steelers to hear. But they lost Isaac Sumalo at left guard, who played really well for them coming over from the Eagles. I think that something on that left side of the offensive line, whether it's a guard or a tackle or something flexible, I'd really like that. Fano out of Utah, it seems like Fano's dropping down the board a little bit, and he's a player that has tackle experience and can play guard. And so I think a player like that, if you want a dude who, oh my gosh, Broderick's out the season because of neck injury, plug him into one of the tackle spots. Oh man, Broderick's back in, but we want to upgrade one of our guard positions because we have a backup who we like who can start. But like, let's just throw him in at guard. That having a flexible offensive lineman like somebody like a Fano would be a good pick. So I put left offensive lineman. Specifically a separator receiver. As you said, Pittman and DK, two big bodies who can catch the ball. Pretty good hands, just pretty big, strong receivers. But man, I think they need a separator where Calvin Austin, even though he was fast, wasn't a separator. He was just a dude who could run. I think a dude like an Omar Cooper, a Lemon, a Tyson in the first round, if you want to get one of those dudes, I think those are all guys where you throw them in the slot and they just get open all the time. You design plays for them, and I think they can all get good yards after catch, where DK, because he's a big physical dude, can get yards after catch. But he's not necessarily a shake and bake type dude. It's more of a straight line speed or a take a slant and go. Michael Pittman's not that. So I think a separator yak type of receiver will be awesome for this offense that I think needs to draft probably one wide receiver, maybe two would be good, just because Roman Wilson's been very underwhelming. Quarterback hasn't been mentioned. Of course, Aaron Rodgers, is he coming back? Is he not? I don't like it. I don't like this at all. I'm not happy as a Steelers fan with this Aaron Rodgers drama. Ty Simpson, I would not like him as my 21 overall pick. I would be open to trading up for him to like 32 with the Seahawks. That's been a linked trade between the Steelers and Seahawks, trading back up to the last pick of the first round. In some mock drafts that I've seen, Ty Simpson's fallen a lot, and I've seen him fall to the Steelers in the second round. If that happened, I'd be way more open to Ty Simpson. I think that quarterback is a lock as far as a dude being drafted to the Steelers at all this year. They've been linked to a number of the second-tier sort of quarterbacks. Cole Payton, I think, is a dude they've had a lot of interest in. Carson Beck out of Miami is a dude who they've had a lot of interest in. I'd be much more of one to wait unless the value is just really good. Ty Simpson, because the value is not good in the first round, I don't like it. But Ty Simpson at pick 54 in the second round, the value is much better, and he has starter potential. But do you feel good about him being a starter? Maybe not necessarily. But because of the value, I like him a lot more in the second. The other position that kind of popped for me, this run defense wasn't great this last year, but defensive tackle they've invested heavily in. Derek Harmon played really well last year. He was a great run defender last year. Cam Hayward, obviously, a great run defender. And they have Wyatt Black and I'm blanking on his name, the tackle out of Wisconsin. But we have a number of tackles who I think can play. We have a number of edges who can play. Yeah, Keanu Benton, who's a solid, a good player as well. Defensive tackle feels like the marquee stop the run position, but I don't think we need defensive tackle necessarily, maybe a nose specifically, but you don't need to draft that early, in my opinion, even though you could with somebody like a Caden McDonald. I actually looked at slot corner, specifically a run defending slot corner, as being a good spot where the Steelers could stop the run out of, or somebody like a D'Angelo Pons who's physical, or a Keontae Scott out of Miami. I think having that sort of dude where you line him up and feel good about him covering the slot receiver, but also, hey, put Alex Highsmith on that side as the edge and put Keontae Scott as the slot on that side. You don't want to run over there. You simply are like, man, those are two dudes who can stop the run really well. Let's go the other way. Oh, TJ Watt's over there if they don't trade him. But let's just go towards TJ Watt, I guess. And I think that outside run stopping will be much better with the slot corner who can do that. Because Jalen Ramsey, good tackler, but he's older and playing more safety. Deshaun Elliott, really good tackler, but he was banged up last year and he's bounced around his career, so we don't know how reliable he would be as a Steeler. But I think having a tackling slot corner could remake this defense from being a poor tackling defense to being a much better tackling defense, specifically out of the slot.
All right. Well, there we have it, everybody. We have gone through every single team post free agency, what we think they should be doing in the draft. Next week, early next week, we'll record and we'll get it up early enough so that you guys have a chance to watch it. We're gonna do one more mock draft before our draft party simulcast for the first round on Thursday of next week, the 23rd, watching the first round and reacting as we did last year. Nick, you got to stay off of Twitter this time because you were finding out picks before they happened. But no, we're super looking forward to that. Let us know if we talked about your team today, what you liked, what you didn't. Maybe specific people that you have in mind for some of the needs that we said and the positions that we said. And yeah, we will catch you next week. Next week is draft week. It's finally here, and of course we're super excited about that. So we will talk to you next week. Have a good one, everybody.